Hello everyone, Alan Sens here, and welcome to this segment on strategic bombing. Not the most cheery of subjects, but let's get started. Here are the learning objectives for this segment. When we're done, you should be able to describe the evolution of strategic bombing. You should be able to explain the motives behind the strategic bombing campaigns of World War II. And you should be able to describe the scale of the strategic bombing of Germany, and in particular, the significance of Hamburg and Dresden. Just a quick note on terminology. Many terms have been used to describe the bombing of cities by aircraft. Strategic bombing, aerial bombardment, strategic bombardment, and carpet bombing are all examples, and are still in use today. The idea of using aircraft to attack cities predates World War I, when the idea of the aerial bombardment of cities was openly discussed in the press and in popular literature. There was widespread fear of aerial attack in many societies at the time. H.G. Wells captured this fear in his book called The War in the Air, written in 1907, in which he even spoke of airborne atomic warfare. World War I saw some aerial attacks against cities, but these were limited by the technology available at the time. This bomber was typical of the period, and it kind of looks like a wagon with wings, and well, that's because it is a wagon with wings, and there's very limited range, very limited bomb load, very limited speed with this type of technology. However, the fear of aerial attack grew after World War I as aircraft technology improved. There was widespread fear of vulnerability in many societies, a fear of surprise attack, a fear that air attack could destroy industry and therefore a country's capacity to wage war, and a fear of the impact that bombing would have on civilian morale. It was felt that bombing could actually lead to social chaos, revolution, and defeat. These fears were reinforced by two major examples. During the Spanish Civil War, the infamous terror bombing of Guernica took place on April 26, 1937, by Nazi Germany's Condor Legion and the Italian or fascist nationalist Aviazione Legionaria in support of Francisco Franco. This event inspired one of the most famous anti-war paintings ever made, Pablo Picasso's Guernica. This painting is remarkable for its symbolism. It's been studied extensively, but amongst the many symbolic items of note in the painting are the images of suffering, civilians suffering during the bombing of this city. A second example is the bombing of Nanjing and Guangzhou. These examples occurred during the Japanese invasion of China, which saw the bombing of many cities by the Imperial Japanese Navy and Army Air Services. World War II, though, is when the strategic bombing really emerged in the history of warfare. The war featured the large-scale strategic bombing of cities in both Europe and in Asia, and was all made possible by advances in aircraft technology. Suddenly, these improved aircraft had much greater ranges, much higher speeds, and much larger bomb loads, and therefore, in large numbers, could deliver a tremendous amount of firepower against their targets. There were multiple motives behind the strategic bombing campaigns of World War II. These included an effort to destroy war industry, an effort to destroy transportation infrastructure, to cause maximum disruption to all economic activity, to force diversion of resources to home defense, and to undermine civilian morale. There were many examples in World War II. The Germans bombed Rotterdam and London and Leningrad, and the Japanese bombed Shanghai and Guangqing, among others. But the largest bombing campaigns were directed against Germany and Japan from late 1942 to 1945. We're going to focus on Germany in this segment. Of particular significance was the bombing of Hamburg in 1943 and Dresden in 1945. Allied bombing raids attacked Hamburg many times, but on the night of July 27, 1943, a large raid devastated the city. The bombing created a vortex of superheated air, which created a firestorm. The winds reached 240 kilometers per hour, and temperatures reached 800 degrees centigrade. The firestorm incinerated more than 21 square kilometers of the city. Many of the dead died of asphyxiation in bomb shelters and cellars as the firestorm consumed the available oxygen. 42,600 civilians were killed and over 37,000 were wounded. The bombing of Dresden took place in the final months of World War II. In 4 raids in 1945, British and American bombers dropped more than 3,900 tons of high explosive bombs and incendiary devices on the city. The resulting firestorm destroyed 39 square kilometers of the city center. Between 22,000 and 25,000 people were killed. The testimony of survivors of these attacks illustrates the horrific effects of strategic bombing on civilian populations. As Lothar Metzger remembers, we saw terrible things. Cremated adults shrunk to the size of small children. Pieces of arms and legs, dead people, whole families burnt to death. Burning people ran to and fro, burnt coaches filled with civilian refugees, dead rescuers and soldiers. Many were calling and looking for their children and families, and fire everywhere, everywhere fire. And all the time the hot wind of the firestorm threw people back into the burning houses they were trying to escape from. I cannot forget these terrible details. I can never forget them. And from Margaret Fryer, to my left I suddenly see a woman. I can see her to this day and shall never forget it. She carries a bundle in her arms. It is a baby. She runs, she falls, and the child flies in an arc into the fire. Suddenly I saw people again right in front of me. They scream and gesticulate with their arms. And then, to my utter horror and amazement, I see how one after the other they simply seem to let themselves drop to the ground. Today I know that these unfortunate people were the victims of lack of oxygen. They fainted and then burnt to cinders. Insane fear grips me, and from then on I repeat one simple sentence to myself continuously. I don't want to burn to death. I do not know how many people I fell over. I know only one thing, that I must not burn. These 2 bombings, among many others, remain significant today. Were Hamburg and Dresden war crimes? This debate is ongoing. So to revisit our learning objectives. Now, after this segment, you should be able to describe the evolution of strategic bombing. You should be able to explain the motives behind the strategic bombing campaigns of World War II. And you should be able to describe the scale of the strategic bombing of Germany and the significance of Hamburg and Dresden. Now, what this history reveals is that strategic bombing and the targeting of civilians was actually prevailing practice in World War II well before the development of the atomic bomb. The atomic bomb, therefore, gets introduced into an environment in which you already have this kind of strategic bombing practice going on in a war environment. We're going to revisit this later, both in class and in the next segment. Thanks for watching.